Why do you say that we can't discuss character without discussing structure?
That's an interesting question. I have to think about that for a second. We can discuss character without structure, but we can't discuss a movie without structure. So a character, if the central issue of every movie is the growth of the character. So how the character grows is structured. And so that's how they're interlaced. So if we understand how the structure works with the character and the character works with the structure, then we understand what the process of the movie is going to be. So the character overcoming a flaw and overcoming a barrier to his goal, that's what creates the structure of the movie. So they can't be torn apart for a movie. I mean, you can build a character without a movie, but you can't build a movie without a character.
You say that we go to the movies to see character, that we want to see people, we want to see people go through changes and fight against all odds?
Mm-hmm. We go to, well, the first reason we go to movie is to feel something. And the only way we can feel something, feel sadness, feel joy, feel laughter, feel fear, the only way we can feel that is if we can identify with somebody on the screen. If it's just a rock falling down onto a mountain, we don't feel fear unless we see somebody about to be hit by the rock. If we don't see, we can see a rocket going to the moon, but we don't feel anything unless we know there's somebody in the rocket that might get lost or might hit the moon by accident or go off course. So we don't see, if we don't see a character, we don't want to go to the movies. If we don't see if we don't get a feeling from the movie, we don't appreciate the movie. So this is one of the things that sometimes you will watch a movie and you'll just have no feeling at all. And you'll walk out of the movie and say, what was that about? I don't understand. Why would I want to go see that movie? But if you see a movie, even if it's not very well done, but if the emotion is there, if we see that person going through a problem and solving the problem, if we see that person having fear, if we fear for that person's life, then we like that movie because we felt an emotion in that movie. And that's because of the journey of the character.
I think you've said we don't even necessarily have to like the character.
Correct.
It could be somebody that's not really likable to our personal taste.
Right.
But if we're invested in that journey?
Well, if we're fascinated by that character. For example, let's look at Godfather 2. We have Michael Corleone. He starts off being a pretty sympathetic character, but he turns into a monster. He'll kill and do whatever needs to be done to maintain his family, two families, his real family and his mafia family. He'll do whatever he needs to do that. And by the end, he's despicable. I mean, he'll kill people just because he has to. He thinks he has to maintain power. So we don't like him, but we're fascinated by his process and by the way he deals with people and the way he manipulates people and the way he's able to kill people and think he has a good reason for doing so. So a fascinating character can be enough for us to be in the film. We don't like Freddy in Nightmare on Elm Street, but we're fascinated by Freddy. What's going on with that character? Horror movies are a good example. We don't like everybody in a horror movie, but we have to empathize with the person that's on the receiving end of the horror. We have to understand, we have to like that person. But the main character really in a horror movie is the person that's perpetrating the horror. And that's the person that we have to be fascinated by. At least that's my view of horror movies. I'm not a great fan of horror movies, I have to tell you, because I don't like that kind of violence for no purpose, except to scare people. So people like to be scared. That's why they go to horror movies. They like to feel fear in a safe place. That's a weird thing to say. Feel fear in a safe place. That's why people like roller coasters. People like roller coasters because you can feel fear going over the hill, but you know you're safe. You're okay, but you're scared. But you're okay, but you're scared. So that's the kind of feeling that people like to see in a horror movie. And that's why we go to horror movies. We like to feel fear. On the other hand, if you're a teenager, you like to squeeze the person next to you. So that's part of the deal.
Sure. And that can be scary depending on who's sitting next to you. But
Exactly. If you know them or not.
Yeah, exactly. But I know you said we're fascinated by certain characters, whether we like them or not. I was thinking of The Devil Wears Prada, and then you mentioned that you loved Salinger. Mm-hmm. So there's My Salinger Year, where Sigourney Weaver plays this wonderful book editor. And hard as nails, moody, you can't read her. It's fascinating. And J.D. Salinger is their top client. I don't know if you saw the movie.
No, I haven't
seen
that.
Okay. So again, wonderful. Yeah, it's so great with Margaret Qualley. And so again, not able to pin down the character, don't necessarily like the person, but love watching their different dynamics.
Right. It's fascinating. If a character is really interesting, we're interested in that movie. So a character has to be either likable or interesting. If they're not, I mean, if they're all villains, we're not going to like it. So you always have to have somebody we root for, even if we don't really like them, especially. And throughout most of The Godfather Part 2, we root for Michael Corleone, even though he starts out as a killer. He kills people. But he said, I was in the army, I killed people. Now I'm killing people for a different purpose. It's an interesting point of view.
Sure. The first part of the movie is to find out what is wrong with this character or with this character's life?
The first part of the movie is to get to know this character in his or her world, so that we see how this character needs to change for some reason, whatever it is. And we usually get an idea what the flaw is. The best movies will show you this character's flaw in the first 5 minutes visually. So if the character is greedy, we see that in the first 5 minutes visually. We don't see somebody saying, hey, you're greedy. That's not going to give us enough information. But if we see that person acting in that way, then we understand what that person's flaw is. But we also have to see something that makes us either interested in that character or like that character. And that's why, I can't remember his name, Blake, whatever it was.
Oh, Save the Cat?
Save the Cat. That's why he wrote Save the Cat, because there's always a moment in the first 5 minutes where the character does something that we say, oh, I like that guy, or why I'm really interested in that guy.
Sure. I could think about, let's say, if we were going to see a greedy character, let's say maybe they lived in a New York City high-rise, and maybe they always pass their doorman, and the doorman's, hey, how are you, Mr. So-and-so, or whatever, And then one day he gives them a Christmas tip. So we go, okay, he can't be that bad.
Right.
Hey, I got 5 kids at home, and then, so he gives it to them. But normally we see this guy stiffing waiters on their tips, things like that. But then that one moment, so we go, okay, so he's not all bad.
Yeah, there's something in it. He's doing that for a show. He's trying to show people that he's tough. That's why he doesn't tip people. Maybe at work he's an asshole because he believes that's the way he has to be to get ahead. But in the end, we see him feed his cat, or we see him pat his daughter on the head, or he donates to charity secretly, whatever. That's usually the case if somebody is going to go through a major change, and they're going to have to. The major change is interesting because they have to drop that nasty part and get back to the part that we saw that they were really good. So they have to get back to their central core, the central core of the goodness that's inside of everybody. Even bad people have something interesting. We were talking about antagonists a little while ago and how they have to have a human quality. Well, the worst antagonist that you can think of is Adolf Hitler. But he loved his dogs, and his Eva Braun loved him, so there must have been something in him that was actually human. But that makes it even more chilling,
right,
how nasty he was in the end.
Or women that fall in love with serial killers that are in prison.
Go. Yeah.
And I don't understand that phenomenon, but I know there's been books written and things like that.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's something in them that's charming, probably, and maybe a narcissistic personality disorder, that they know how to push the right buttons and say the right compliments.
But there's something human in them. I once had a relationship with a woman who had an ex-husband in prison. So her relationship with that man was, she saw something vulnerable in him. And that's the part that she loved at that time. So even though he was a thief and a liar and whatever else he was, I didn't know him personally, she saw something in him that was human, and she was able to love that person. Now, I don't recommend falling in love with people in prison, but you can. People do all the time, just with letters. When people reveal themselves, I believe that people really deep down, nobody's really nasty on purpose. They have to be either taught to be nasty, or they have to have the circumstances of their life press on them so hard that they react to it in the wrong way. They don't stop and think about it, they react. I think that given the choice, most people would be good to other people.
Sure, sure. You know, I had seen a movie about women that fell in love with prisoners as well, and that there was a safety knowing that they wouldn't leave them. They might leave them for another man in prison, but but they wouldn't leave them for another woman. So,
well, there's
anyway.
that.
Yeah, but that's a whole nother video. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I don't even know why I brought that up. That's interesting.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
Because that's another aspect. The more depth of character you can get into a movie, the better the movie is going to be. And so if your antagonist has something like what we've been talking about, that makes it more interesting and makes you more conflicted. Do I want the protagonist to win in this situation, or do I want the antagonist? And sometimes in a romantic comedy, you have that exact. We were talking about His Girl Friday earlier on. Well, in His Girl Friday, her fiancé is the sweetest guy in the world. He's not really antagonistic, and we want to root for him. But then Cary Grant. And we see that Cary Grant has a real deep feeling for this woman. Even though he blusters on the outside, he really loves this woman. I mean, when she was filing for divorce, he hired a skywriter to say, "Don't do it."
Wow.
So he had a deep feeling for her, so we understand that. And we feel for him, even though he blusters and orders people around, and she has banter with him that makes him sound like, he's a jackass and everything like that. But he's not. We like him. He's complicated. He's fascinating, and he loves her.
Sure, and a lot of us fall in love with complicated people. It's more of a challenge, and we see that in films, like Bridget Jones' Diary.
There we go.
Things like that. She doesn't fall in love with the nice guy. It's usually the more difficult, unattainable person that doesn't treat her well. So it's interesting.
Well, we see a lot of that in women, unfortunately. And,
Well, men fall prey to it too.
Men too. Trust me, I fell in love with a woman that had the ex-husband in prison, so that was a problem.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow, you've lived an interesting life.
Oh, I certainly have.
Yeah.